You wanted to fight for your homeland's freedom, but instead Napoleon sends you to battle against the freedom of slaves on the other side of the world. This was the tragic irony that befell the Polish legionnaires in Haiti. But before I tell you this story, consider what you would have done. Followed orders from the man you thought was your liberator, or stood with fellow freedom fighters an ocean away? Was it betrayal, or perhaps the most principled choice of all? Let's begin. To understand this story, you need to know that Poland had been erased from the map. The great powers, Russia, Prussia, and Austria, carved up and swallowed one of Europe's largest kingdoms. The Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth simply ceased to exist. Imagine your country divided between hostile neighbours, your language banned, your culture suppressed. Many Poles fled into exile, dreaming of restoring their homeland. Then came Napoleon Bonaparte. To the Poles, this Corsican general seemed like a godsend, a man who spoke of liberty and fought Poland's oppressors. When his armies smashed through Europe, Polish exiles saw their chance. General Dąbrowski convinced the French to form Polish military units called the Polish Legions, the first time since the partitions that Poles could fight under their own banners. Napoleon's promise was intoxicating. For your freedom and ours. Thousands of volunteers flocked to these legions. They fought with desperate courage in Italy, believing every victory brought them closer to Polish independence. They were magnificent soldiers, motivated by something more powerful than money or glory, the dream of home. You stand on the cobblestones of Livorno, a bustling Italian port in May 1802. The sound of familiar Polish voices echoes through the soldiers' quarters, but the mood has changed. Napoleon has just signed the Peace of Luneville, ending hostilities with Austria. Suddenly, those 5,000 Polish fighters he praised so highly have become an inconvenient surplus. You're an ordinary legionnaire, perhaps the son of a farmer from near Krakow, or maybe a craftsman's boy from a market town. Your personal history doesn't matter now. What matters is that you, like your comrades, believed Napoleon when he promised to rebuild Poland. You left everything behind for that dream. But Napoleon was never the liberator Poles imagined. He was a pragmatist who used men like tools, discarding them when no longer needed. And now he had the perfect solution for his Polish problem. Across the Atlantic on the Caribbean island of Saint-Domingue, modern-day Haiti, the world's most successful slave revolution was raging. Led by Toussaint Louverture, a brilliant former slave, 500,000 enslaved Africans had risen against their French masters. They had declared independence and abolished slavery, creating the first free black republic in the Americas. For Napoleon, this was intolerable. The loss of Saint-Domingue would cost France its most profitable colony, where sugar and coffee plantations generated enormous wealth through the blood and sweat of enslaved Africans. But more dangerously, a successful slave revolution might inspire uprisings throughout the Americas, threatening the entire colonial system. Napoleon decided to kill two birds with one stone. He would send his surplus Polish soldiers to crush the Caribbean rebellion. He had no idea he was about to orchestrate one of the greatest tragedies in Polish military history. You emerge from the barracks in the Tuscan port. Livorno pulses with life. Dock workers shout over each other. Fishermen mend their nets. And the air carries the scent of sea salt mixed with fresh fish and wine. Nothing suggests that in a few hours you'll begin a journey that will become a nightmare. The order comes suddenly, no explanations, no details, just a dry command in French. Load onto the transports. Destination: unknown. Officers remain silent as graves, and when enlisted men ask questions, they answer evasively. Rumours circulate. Some speak of Egypt, others of islands somewhere far beyond the ocean. Polish historian Szymon Askenazy would later write that the legionnaires were loaded onto ships without even being informed of their destination. You're escorted by armed French guards, in case of mutiny. Fortunately, they prove unnecessary. The Poles obey orders, though some officers protest. You approach the harbour and see 12 transport ships before you. Old sailing vessels crammed to the brim with men and equipment. Packed like herrings, one participant would later describe conditions on the decks. The French quartermaster economised on everything. Too little space, too little food, too little fresh water. But there's some compensation. Before sailing, you receive your back pay plus a colonial bonus. This lifts spirits. Finally, you have money in your pockets for possible adventures in exotic ports. No one yet suspects that most of you will never have the chance to spend it. You board one of the transports. The terrible stuffiness hits you. Dampness, rats, vermin. You don't even get a hammock. You lie wherever you can find space, squeezed between other soldiers like sardines in a tin. Darkness reigns in the holds, and rats feel perfectly at home. Food rations prove meagre. Hardtack, often mouldy or wormy. Salted meat, a bit of dried beans. Water in barrels quickly turns sour and develops a film of green scum. On May 17th, the flotilla sails from Livorno. Initially, morale isn't terrible. Many are happy for a change from garrison duty. The prospect of an exotic Caribbean adventure fires the imagination. You expect tropical excitement straight from pirate tales. But on the very first day of the voyage, you discover the grim reality. On overcrowded decks, it's impossible to find space to stretch your legs. Officers have their cabins, but enlisted men crowd below deck in stifling darkness. Every scrap of space has been claimed. Hygiene becomes impossible. Latrines are just barrels placed at the bow with limited access. The stench of mouldy food, dirty water, and unwashed bodies becomes overwhelming. Rats multiply at an alarming rate. At night you hear their constant scurrying and squeaking. The flotilla has barely left port when a violent storm strikes on May 15th and 16th, still in coastal waters. Waves reach terrifying heights, and the wind howls like a demon. One transport ship cannot withstand the elemental assault. It crashes against rocks near the San Vincenzo lighthouse, right off the Tuscan coast. You hear the cries of drowning men mixing with the roar of waves. Of the 180 Polish soldiers on board, only about 60 managed to escape. Over 100 of your brothers perish, the first victims of this expedition. You haven't even reached your destination, and already the sea has begun claiming its harvest. It's an omen of what awaits you. Nature in Haiti will prove as merciless as the Tyrrhenian Sea in storm. The wrecked flotilla is forced to wait for better weather. Ships seek shelter in bays, repairing damaged masts and sails. When the storm finally subsides, you can count the losses. One ship on the bottom, over 100 dead. The rest of the fleet damaged. It's a disastrous beginning to an expedition that was supposed to be France's reconquest of its most valuable colony. Soldiers begin whispering about bad omens, wondering if perhaps it would have been better to stay in Italy. But orders are orders. A legionnaire cannot afford to show fear. When the flotilla finally resumes sailing, you manage to gather the scattered ships near Gibraltar. The sight of that mighty rock makes an enormous impression. It's the gateway between the Mediterranean and the Atlantic, between the known world and whatever fate awaits beyond the ocean. Conditions on the ships worsen daily. Personal hygiene becomes impossible on crowded decks. When the sea grows rough, which happens often, the improvised latrines overflow, spreading stench and disease throughout the ship. Already during the voyage, the first signs of scurvy appear. a disease caused by prolonged lack of vitamin C. Gums swell and bleed, teeth loosen, purple spots appear on skin. Your comrades begin complaining of bone pain, weakness, and chronic exhaustion. This is only the beginning of the hell that awaits you. But you don't know that yet. You still harbour hope that the worst is behind you. By late June, you reach Malaga, then the main staging port of Cadiz. It's your first serious stop in weeks. These extended layovers in intermediate ports have their advantages, though none of you yet appreciate how precious they are. You step on land for the first time since leaving Livorno. Your legs shake after the long sea voyage. Sailors call this sea legs. But the joy of walking on solid ground overwhelms everything else. The air smells different than on the ship. Fresh, without that terrible stench from the hold. In Malaga and Cadiz, you can replenish food and water supplies, rest from maritime hardships. Local fruits, oranges, lemons, figs, are true blessings after months of dry provisions. Freshly baked bread smells like paradise compared to stale ship's biscuits. There are attractions too. Local wine flows freely. Andalusian red is strong and cheap. Taverns quickly empty your pockets, but provide diversions that let you forget recent disasters and the unknown fate that awaits you. Guitars ring out in warm evenings, and flamenco dances until dawn. Andalusian women are beautiful. Their dark eyes and olive skin work on the imagination of northern Europeans. Spanish music sounds exotic to Polish ears. Rhythms you've never heard before. Officers allow soldiers more freedom than usual. Everyone knows this might be the last chance for normal life before long months at sea and whatever awaits at your destination. No one knows what that will be, but everyone senses it won't be easy. You spend several weeks in relative peace. You begin regretting that you must leave Spain at all. Life here seems light. The sun shines, wine flows, women laugh. Why travel further into the unknown? But at the end of July comes the inevitable order. The flotilla must continue its voyage. Between July 23rd and 25th, all ships leave Cadiz, heading for the Atlantic Ocean. This is farewell to Europe. You watch European shores disappear, perhaps for the last time in your life, though you don't yet know it. You stand on deck watching European coastlines vanish beyond the horizon. Before you stretches endless ocean. Thousands of kilometers of water separate you from your destination. Atlantic crossing usually takes about 6 weeks, 40 days of sailing with favorable winds. This will be the longest journey of your life. The first days on the Atlantic are relatively calm. Wind blows from the east, sails fill with its pressure, ships sail at good speed. But the ocean is a capricious companion. Weather can change within hours, and peaceful seas can transform into raging elements. Fortunately, the crossing itself passes without major military surprises. There's peace with England, so the British fleet doesn't attack the convoy. The British rule the oceans, their sailors are considered the world's finest. But due to the Treaty of Amiens, they don't trouble the French. Sometimes foreign sails appear on the horizon, but no one approaches within cannon range. Everyone knows peace is fragile and could end at any moment, but the Royal Navy still abides by treaty provisions. However, the ocean has its own dangers, more threatening than enemy bullets. Long sailing, weeks of monotony, diseases spreading in the confined space of ships. Food rations shrink daily, while rats multiply alarmingly. More and more of your comrades fall victim to diseases, mainly scurvy and dysentery. Weeks drag on endlessly. The only entertainment consists of old sailors' stories about sea monsters, corsairs, and exotic islands. You begin regretting ever joining the legions. Napoleon's promises about free Poland now seem as distant as stars in the sky. Was it worth leaving your homeland for this hell at sea? Finally, after 3 months of travel, exhausted, weakened, decimated by disease, you reach the shores of Saint-Domingue, the French colony we now call Haiti. On September 2nd, the first wave of Polish legionnaires lands in Cap Français. But this is only the beginning of the real hell. While you and your comrades from the first expedition are already struggling with tropical hell on Saint-Domingue, Europe is frantically preparing a second expedition. The situation on the island proves far worse than anticipated in Paris, and Napoleon decides to send reinforcements. At the end of December 1802, the former 2nd Half Brigade of the Danubian Legion was transferred from northern Italy to Liguria. Polish soldiers marched from garrisons in Mantua and Milan to Genoa, the great port on the Ligurian Sea, city of sailors and ship owners. On January 24th of the following year, loading begins onto ships of the French squadron under Rear Admiral Jacques Bédoux. This time, these aren't old transports like the first expedition. 3 powerful ships of the line have sailed to Genoa, each armed with 74 cannons, true floating fortresses. They're accompanied by 2 frigates and a transport vessel. About 2,460 Polish soldiers embark on these units. The first group, numbering nearly 1,960 men, sails on January 27th. The second, about 475, departs February 13th. But this expedition too is marked by misfortune from the very start. On January 21st, almost immediately after sailing from Genoa, the squadron encounters a violent storm on the Ligurian Sea. This isn't an ordinary storm, it's a true cataclysm. Wind howls with hurricane force, waves reach the height of houses, and enormous ships are tossed like toys. For 2 days the elements scatter the fleet across the entire sea. When relative calm finally arrives on January 26th, it turns out that Le Fougueux has been cut off from the rest of the squadron and must continue the journey alone. These reinforcements won't reach Saint-Domingue until March 1803, but it will be too late to reverse the war's fortunes. The second wave of Polish legionnaires will find the island in even worse condition than you saw it in September. You're among the first to set foot on Caribbean soil. After 3 months of maritime nightmare, the tropical island appears almost like paradise. Cap Français, then capital of the French colony of Saint-Domingue, today's Haiti, stuns with wealth and exotic beauty, at least at first glance. On September 2nd, the first wave of Polish legionnaires, the 113th Half Brigade, lands in this Caribbean port. The sight that opens before you takes your breath away. Dazzling vegetation you've never seen before. Coconut palms reaching toward the sky, blooming bougainvillea in shades of purple and pink. Mango trees hang heavy with succulent fruits the size of human fists. Breadfruit trees, avocados, papayas, wealth that in Europe you could only dream of. Intoxicating flower scents drift through hot air. Frangipani, hibiscus, jasmine. Fragrances you never encountered in your homeland. Markets pile high with fruit. Mangoes with flesh sweeter than honey. Pineapples with aroma so intense it makes you dizzy. Papayas the size of human heads. Avocados soft and creamy as butter. It's a true feast for someone who spent months eating only stale hardtack. Beautiful Creole women stroll the streets in colourful dresses. Their skin has the colour of coffee with cream, hair gleams in sunlight, and eyes burn with mysterious fire. They speak in a melodic mixture of French and Creole that sounds like music. You've never seen such beautiful women. Local music combines African and European rhythms. African drums interweave with French violins, creating sounds that quicken the pulse. Dances are sensual and hypnotic. bodies move in ways that make you blush to the tips of your ears. Cheap local rum called tafia flows freely in port taverns. It's strong as hell and burns your throat, but after months of maritime torture, it tastes like ambrosia. All this makes an enormous impression on a European newcomer who previously knew only the taste of stale biscuits and fetid water. What's more, you receive the promised colonial bonus, an addition to your pay for tropical service. Suddenly you have more money in your pockets than ever before. Many of you can afford feasts and revelries after coming ashore. Finally, you can forget the horrible conditions on ship. But the idyll doesn't last long. On your very first day, shocking news reaches you. General Władysław Franciszek Jabłonowski, your fellow countryman and brigade commander, died several weeks earlier of yellow fever. This Polish general, of partly African descent, was supposed to be your guide in this foreign land. Jabłonowski was an extraordinary figure, son of a Polish nobleman and a woman of African origin, educated in Paris, an experienced military man. Haitians saw in him a potential ally. His death deprived the Polish legions not only of a commander, but also of a mediator who could have helped in reaching understanding with the local population. It's a bad omen. If even someone partly adapted to the climate didn't survive, what awaits ordinary legionnaires? Climate and tropical diseases quickly make themselves known. The murderous heat of Caribbean sun has no comparison with anything in Europe. Humidity makes uniforms stick to bodies and makes breathing difficult. The air is so thick and hot that breathing feels like drinking heated soup. And above all, yellow fever. A disease unknown in Europe begins decimating the ranks of newcomers. Mosquitoes carry it, and they're everywhere, buzzing day and night, preventing sleep, and their bites swell and itch to the point of madness. As one legionnaire wrote, the climate's property was so terrible that within 24 hours after death, the body turned black as tar. The sick first develop high fever, then vomiting appears, first normal, then bloody, and finally black as tar. Napoleon has no mercy for the sick and dying. The situation in Haiti proves far worse than assumed in Paris, and every soldier capable of fighting is needed. General Charles Leclerc, Napoleon's brother-in-law and expedition commander, has been waging heavy battles against black rebel forces since February. Leading the insurgents is General Toussaint Louverture, a former slave and also a brilliant strategist and charismatic leader. He can unite different groups, black slaves, free mulattoes, and even some white colonists sympathizing with the revolution. His closest officers are men hardened by years of fighting: Jean-Jacques Dessalines, ruthless and effective Henri Christophe, ambitious and intelligent Alexandre Pétion, educated and diplomatic. All know the island like their own pockets and exploit every weakness of the invaders. Without an acclimatization period, straight from ship decks, you're sent to the front line to support weakened French garrisons. On the very day of landing, the 1st Battalion finds itself in battle under Cap Français, where Poles repel insurgent attacks on Fort Picolet. Fighting in the tropics is something completely different from battles in Europe. The heat is unbearable. In heavy uniform, you're soon soaked with sweat. Water runs out within hours, and a jug of fresh water becomes more precious than gold. The sun burns like glowing coal, and reflections from white sand and stones are blinding. There's no shade, no shelter from the heat. European clothing becomes a curse in tropical climate. The enemy fights differently than Austrians or Prussians. Insurgents don't form lines, don't conduct regular attacks. They appear suddenly, strike like lightning, and vanish into jungle. They know every corner of the island, every path, every hiding place, every water source. For them, this is home. For you, an alien and hostile world. Every bush might hide a sniper, every road might be a trap. The local population you are supposed to pacify treats you like invaders. Children flee at your sight, women hide in houses, men stare with hatred. Leclerc's army is devastated by epidemics and desertions. Black and mulatto soldiers, on whom the French relied, begin deserting en masse to join insurgents. They formed the backbone of colonial forces. They were accustomed to climate and knew the terrain. As soon as word reached them of Toussaint's return and the new war for independence, they began deserting in whole units. Some take weapons and ammunition with them, passing them to insurgents. Others simply vanish in the night, leaving French garrisons at half strength. In this situation, Poles are immediately thrown into action. You fight scattered. Individual battalions and companies are divided among different French groupings. There's no time to coordinate units for joint actions. You're like patches on a torn sack of French army. You also perform garrison duty in occupied localities, in isolated outposts scattered across the entire island. Fort Dauphin in the northeast, Jacmel in the south, Saint-Marc on the western coast. Each such point is a small fortress surrounded by a hostile sea of insurgent population. Life at an outpost means constant tension. You never know when attack will come, at dawn when guards are most tired, or at noon when sun saps remaining strength. Already in October, the situation spirals out of control. On the 13th of that month, mulatto soldiers of Generals Pétion and Clairvaux, about 2,500 men, betray the French. Shortly after, on October 17th, even the previously loyal General Jean-Jacques Dessalines switches to the insurgent side. Dessalines, ruthless and capable, is a former slave who worked his way up to become one of the most important commanders. His betrayal signals thousands of other black soldiers. It's time to end French oppression. In this chaos, the isolated 1st Polish Battalion, commanded by Captain Wodzinski, becomes surrounded and decimated in the mountains of the northern part of the island. From 984 soldiers, after 2 months about 150 remain fit for duty. After a year, only 20 from this unit will survive. This is the true scale of tragedy that befalls Polish legions in Haiti. Wodzinski's battalion fights like lions. Surrounded by overwhelming enemy forces, cut off from water and food supplies, they endure tropical heat exceeding 40 degrees Celsius in shade. Insurgents give no quarter. They know every white soldier who survives will continue fighting against their freedom. Autumn brings increasing disasters. In November, General Leclerc, Napoleon's brother-in-law and expedition commander, dies of yellow fever. His death becomes a symbol of French mission failure in Haiti. Command passes to General Donatien Rochambeau, a ruthless man who continues brutal repressions. Rochambeau was already notorious for his cruelty. His methods became legendary in the worst sense, drowning prisoners in the sea, throwing captives to fighting dogs, public executions to terrorize the population. The French general believed only terror could break insurgent will. But the real enemy isn't enemy bullets, it's tropical diseases. Yellow fever, dysentery, malaria, and other plagues claim greater harvests than all battles combined. Polish mortality grows exponentially with every week spent on the island. At the epidemic's peak, thousands of French and Poles die monthly. Hospitals in Cap Français overflow with corpses. There's no more room in morgues. Bodies are stored in makeshift barracks, then burned on great pyres outside the city. The earth is too hard to dig graves in tropical heat. The stench of death hangs over all of Cap Français like a cloud. In the first weeks after the 113th Half Brigade's landing, Over 400 Polish soldiers are hospitalized simultaneously, felled by disease. That's nearly half the entire contingent. Doctors are helpless. Early 19th century medicine knows neither yellow fever's causes nor treatment methods. They try bloodletting, emetic mixtures, and purgatives, all in vain. Tropical climate, yellow fever and dysentery decimate entire units before they even enter battle. Disease is democratic. It spares neither enlisted men nor officers. Colonels die as quickly as common legionnaires. A legionnaire's daily life in Haiti is true nightmare. You wake each morning not knowing if you'll see evening. Around you die men with whom you shared bread for months during the voyage. Comrades with whom you sang Polish songs in Cadiz. Taverns now lie fevered in overcrowded hospitals. Bodies of your brothers turn black in sun within a day of death. The climate's property was so terrible, wrote one participant. Decomposition in tropical heat progresses with lightning speed. The stench of death hangs over all of Cap Français. French officer Pierre Thouvenot reported to the Ministry of Colonies about Poles. These heavy and apathetic people, foreign to our customs, at enormous distance from their homeland, lose all their energy here. They're terrified by dangers of colonial warfare. They can only be used in garrisons, and even then it's dangerous to entrust them with responsibility. This harsh opinion reflects the observation that soldiers exhausted by disease lacked strength for forced marches in tropical heat and battles with mobile opponents in jungle. Poles, accustomed to European climate, couldn't adapt to Caribbean conditions. Drinking water becomes more precious than gold. Springs are either occupied by insurgents or contaminated. What you manage to obtain often contains bacteria causing diarrhea and other stomach diseases. Soldiers die from dehydration, losing litres of fluids through vomiting and diarrhea. Food also presents problems. European products quickly spoil in tropical climate. Local fruits and vegetables are unknown and arouse suspicion. Some indeed prove poisonous for people unaccustomed to such diet. At the beginning of the next year, French situation becomes desperate. Uprising has spread across the entire country like fire in dry grass. There are no longer safe places. Even the capital, Cap Français, is constantly threatened by insurgent attacks. In January, rebels conduct a bold raid on the very heart of French defence. They capture the military hospital near Cap Français and murder about 1,600 sick and wounded, along with medical personnel. Among victims are several dozen Polish legionnaires who lay there with fever and wounds. This wasn't a battle. It was slaughter of defenceless people. Insurgents had no mercy for anyone wearing French uniform. Patients were murdered in their beds, and nurses and doctors died trying to save the sick. The hospital became a slaughterhouse. This attack showed how much the war's character had changed. These were no longer clashes of regular armies, but total war of extermination. Insurgents knew they couldn't afford sentiment. Every surviving French soldier was a potential threat to their freedom. Similar fate befalls isolated outposts throughout the island. In February, French garrisons on Tortuga Island are massacred to the last man. Small forts and guard posts that were supposed to control important strategic points fall one after another. Their crews die in martyr-like conditions. In such realities, freshly arrived reinforcements, the 114th Half Brigade of Polish legionnaires, can no longer reverse war's fortunes. They arrive on the island in March when French situation is practically hopeless. They're thrown into desperate defence of the last bastions of colonial power. In April, General Rochambeau attempts a final offensive in the southern department. It's a desperate attempt to regain initiative when everything else has failed. Polish battalions participate in operations around Torbeck and Cays on the southern coast. However, due to lack of coordination and total numerical superiority of insurgents, The offensive ends in defeat. Polish units suffer heavy losses and are forced to withdraw. Many good soldiers die in pointless attacks on fortified enemy positions. Leclerc, an important port city in the south, becomes besieged by insurgent forces under General André Rigaud. The garrison, including soldiers from the 114th Half Brigade, repels successive attacks for several weeks, inflicting heavy losses on rebels. It seems the city can be held. Unfortunately, yellow fever soon claims greater harvest than enemy bullets. The garrison melts away not in battle, but in hospitals. Dozens of soldiers die daily, and there's nowhere to find replacements. Finally, Leclerc must capitulate, not because of lost battle, but lack of men capable of fighting. In May, Great Britain enters war with France, breaking the fragile peace of Amiens. This completely cuts Haiti off from French reinforcements and supplies by sea. The Royal Navy, the world's most powerful fleet, blockades all island ports. It doesn't allow a single French ship to break through to Saint-Domingue shores. The blockade worsens hunger in besieged garrisons. Soldiers eat roots, leaves, and ultimately rats and other rodents. Lack of medicines means even light wounds result in fatal infections. The last points of French resistance fall. On August 1st, the French detachment evacuates from Jérémie on the island's western tip, leaving an unsuspecting Polish garrison in the local citadel. 140 legionnaires become completely isolated, without communication with the rest of the army. Poles defend bravely for 4 days, but the situation is hopeless. On August 5th, they capitulate. Fortunately, Insurgent General Ferru, appreciating Polish courage, allows them to sail to nearby Cuba. This is one of few cases when legionnaires met humane treatment from insurgents. Ferru reportedly said, "These men fought bravely. They're not our true enemies." Besides regular battles, macabre incidents occur that show how cruel this war was. Lieutenant Madejski from Polish legions is taken prisoner and literally sawed alive between 2 boards by insurgents, a type of execution known from slavery times. On the other hand, the French army also committed atrocities that horrified even in those brutal times. General Rochambeau was notorious for executing prisoners by drowning them at sea or throwing them to trained fighting dogs. He also used poisonous gases, suffocating insurgents hiding in caves with sulfur. As situation becomes increasingly hopeless, serious doubts about this expedition's purpose grow among Polish soldiers. Moral dilemmas become unbearable. Continue fighting for Napoleon who deceived you, or stand with slaves fighting for freedom? In letters to families, legionnaires describe terrifying scenes of murder and revenge they witnessed. A recurring theme was disappointment. Poles felt like slaves in a foreign cause, and wrote they were ordered to shoot at those who sought the same thing they did: freedom. French sources often accused Poles of passivity in battles, lack of engagement, even treason. In reality, only part of Polish soldiers actually switched to the insurgent side. Historians estimate this at about 120 to 150 cases. Defections occurred especially when Poles received orders contrary to conscience. The most famous episode involves orders to massacre defenseless black soldiers in Saint-Marc. Kazimierz and Piotr Wierzbicki recorded in their memoirs. When the uprising occurred, Bolesta's prepared battalion with secretly loaded weapons suddenly surrounded the blacks and bayoneted them all. However, Haitian tradition claims Poles refused, plunging bayonets into earth as sign of protest. Historian Jan Pachoński showed that though legionnaires participated in this execution, their role wasn't decisive. But does this ease your conscience? You still don't know. In October, French situation becomes completely hopeless. Capital Port-au-Prince and strategic city Leclerc in the south fall. The last bastions of French power in Haiti melt like snow in sun. Rochambeau knows his mission is over. On November 18th, insurgents under General Dessalines win decisive victory over Rochambeau's forces in the Battle of Vertières. This is the final battle of this war. After it, French resistance practically ends. The Battle of Vertières takes place on hills in the northern part of the island near Cap Français. Remnants of Rochambeau's army, about 5,000 soldiers, including few surviving Polish legionnaires, occupy defensive positions on heights. It's a well-chosen position. Hills provide advantage in firepower. But insurgent numerical superiority is overwhelming. Dessalines can field about 20,000 warriors against the French, 4 times more than the colonial army. Moreover, his men fight for their land, for their families' freedom. Battle begins at dawn with artillery bombardment. French cannons inflict heavy losses on storming insurgents, and for several hours it seems positions might be held. But then happens what French feared most. Several batteries of black soldiers in French army, who until now remained loyal, switch to insurgent side, taking cannons and ammunition with them. French defence collapses within hours. Dessalines leads personal assault on main French positions. His soldiers fight with fury of men who've been humiliated and maltreated their entire lives. They give no quarter. They know defeat means return to slavery, which for them means death. French suffer crushing defeat. Hundreds of soldiers die on battlefield. The rest scatter in panic. Those who manage to escape flee toward Cap Français, the last French fortress on the island. Among the fighters are you, Polish legionnaire, pitiful remnant of once proud half-brigades. Those who survived yellow fever, dysentery and numerous skirmishes now make final resistance in foreign cause for foreign ruler, on foreign soil thousands of kilometres from home. Many of your brothers die in this last battle. Their bodies mix with French and black on bloodied hills of Vertières. No one counts Polish losses. In general chaos of defeat, there was no time for precise reports. On November 30th, Cap Français capitulates. Rochambeau is taken prisoner by British who control waters around the island. The French-Polish expedition to Haiti ends in complete defeat after nearly 2 years of fighting. Then something extraordinary happens. General Dessalines makes a decision that will pass into history. He extends protection to all Polish soldiers, even those who formerly remained in French army until the end. Dessalines orders his commanders that Polish legionnaires not be harmed. On contrary, he commands they be recognized as allies and treated with respect. This is remarkable considering that in the entire French army, Poles constituted barely several % of soldiers. As a result, Poles aren't massacred after Revolution's victory, as happened to most French colonists and prisoners. While white French face death, or at best imprisonment, Polish legionnaires are treated as honoured guests of the new state. Of approximately 5,200 Polish soldiers sent to Haiti, we can estimate that about 4,000 paid with their lives, mainly from tropical diseases, but also in battles with insurgents. This was one of the most deadly campaigns in Polish military history. Only about 300 to 400 Polish legionnaires return home. About 150 are later released from British Army, where they were forcibly enlisted as prisoners of war and also returned to service in times of Duchy of Warsaw. Significantly more, about 1,000 Poles, are forced into British service, mainly in the 60th Infantry Regiment, which later fights in Spain against French. By irony of fate, Polish legionnaires who were supposed to serve Napoleon end up in his greatest enemy's army. Hundreds of other Poles scatter across the world. Some find themselves in British captivity in Jamaica, some reach Cuba, and several dozen remain in Spanish colony Santo Domingo, defending fortresses there until 1809. Poles called Haiti the Hellish Island, and Napoleon himself would later admit this intervention was his greatest governing mistake. He recalled on exile at St. Helena, "If I hadn't sent army to Santo Domingo, I would have had 60,000 more men for the march to Moscow." On January 1st, 1804, on symbolic New Year's Day, Jean-Jacques Dessalines proclaims Haiti's independence and declares himself emperor. After 12 years of bloody struggle, the first black slave republic in history becomes reality. The Independence Proclamation ceremony takes place in Gonaïves, a city in the island's northwest. Dessalines, standing before thousands of his soldiers and representatives of Haitian people, reads the Independence Act. "We swear before entire universe, before posterity and before ourselves, that we forever renounce France." This is a historic moment. For the first time in history, slaves won war against European colonial power and established their own state. Haiti becomes symbol of hope for millions of slaves throughout the Americas and simultaneously source of terror for all colonial powers. Dessalines orders massacre of nearly all white French remaining in Haiti. This is revenge for centuries of oppression and cruelty of plantation system. Massacres of white colonists continue for months. In some island regions, not a single French settler remains alive, but Poles are spared. Moreover, Dessalines issues special orders to treat them as white brothers. This is remarkable when every other white man on island is condemned to death solely for his origin. According to tradition, Haiti's emperor called Poles white blacks of Europe, a term we perceive as controversial today, but then was meant to express belief that Poles were French slaves, exploited and oppressed similarly to Caribbean blacks. This was form of recognition that Poles and Haitians were nations with common experience of fighting for freedom despite racial and cultural differences. Dessalines saw in Polish legionnaires people forced to fight against their own will, similarly to black soldiers in French army. From Poles remaining on island, those who survived war and decided to stay, Dessalines creates 2 infantry battalions in Haitian service. These units guard French prisoners in jails and maintain order in ports. About 120 to 150 Poles actually join ranks of Haitian army and swear loyalty to island's new rulers. Haitians call such European allies La Polonais, Poles. This word permanently enters Haiti's Creole language. A year later, in 1805, Emperor Dessalines proclaims Constitution of New Haitian State. This fundamental document contains remarkable provision regarding status of Haiti's white allies. Article 12 of Constitution categorically forbids all whites from settling in Haiti and owning land. This is radical act of revenge for colonial wrongs. Haiti is to be state exclusively for black and mulatto citizens with no place for former oppressors. However, Article 13 of same constitution exempts 2 nationalities from this ban, Poles and Germans, plus naturalized white women and their children. This is a remarkable exception in document that otherwise categorically closes doors to white settlers. Why Germans? Like Poles, Germans could count on constitutional exception. They were a resident group that didn't participate in former plantation system and often integrated into local society as farmers, merchants, or craftsmen. Their exclusion seemed contrary to the idea that Haiti's new nation was built not on biology, but on loyalty and republican values. Poles are distinguished as only whites, besides a handful of German settlers, recognized as worthy of Haitian citizenship. Dessalines grants Poles Haitian citizenship by collective decree, ordering all surviving Polish soldiers on island be treated like native Haitians. In Constitution, Dessalines also declares all Haiti's citizens are black regardless of skin colour. This eliminates racial differences within new nation. Poles were recognised as black Haitians, brothers in struggle for freedom. This provision had deep symbolic meaning. Historians interpret this as a unique case in colonial history, when former European soldiers were incorporated into newly formed nation of former slaves. This was recognition not only for military service, but primarily for brotherhood in freedom's cause. After Haiti's war ends, a significant group of surviving Polish soldiers decide to settle there permanently. You're one of about 400 legionnaires who remain on island. You form nucleus of local community called Haitian Polonia. You marry local woman, mulatto with beautiful eyes and delicate complexion, and start family. Haitian authorities favour Polish settlement, so you receive land in mountain village Cazale, located about 70 kilometres north of capital Port-au-Prince. Largest concentration of Polish settlers emerges precisely in Cazale, lying in picturesque valley surrounded by green hills. You build houses in European style, establish gardens, cultivate coffee and other tropical plants. However, Polish language quickly falls out of use. Already your children speak mainly French and Creole, knowing only individual Polish words. Smaller communities of Polish descendants also appear in other localities: Fond des Blancs in southern mountains, La Vallée de Jacmel by sea, Port Salut on southwestern coast, or Saint-Jean-du-Sud in southern department. Polish settlers initially preserve certain native traditions and identity. They call their community Le Polonais and proudly call themselves Poles, despite dark complexions of many, resulting from mixed marriages with local women. Nevertheless, to this day, certain unique cultural elements survive in these families, testifying to Polish roots. Popular dance in Cazale is polka, something completely unseen in Caribbean, where African and Latin American rhythms dominate. Women braid hair Polish style. Local language contains sayings derived from Polish phrases like "Chaje ku la Polon," literally rub like Poles. Common surnames in Cazale include Belno from Belnowski, Tomasz, Józef, Stefan, and other typically Polish names adapted to Creole pronunciation. Your fate, and that of other surviving Poles in Haiti, wasn't always peaceful. For a long time you lived in certain isolation and oblivion, both by Poland under partitions and by successive Haitian governments. In the 20th century, this history was rediscovered. In 1983, Pope John Paul II visited. Haitian authorities specially gathered group of Poles from Cazale at Port-au-Prince airport. Local choir sang Polish religious songs in Creole performance. Contemporary descendants of Polish legionnaires in Haiti, often having blue or green eyes, lighter complexion, and Slavic facial features, are aware of their origin. Though Poland is an abstract concept to them, they treat it as part of their identity. This is 9th generation of Haitian Poles currently living on Caribbean soil. Peculiar historical curiosity and simultaneously living monument to Polish-Haitian brotherhood. Your story, soldier of 113 Half Brigade, lives in their hearts and genes. This story carries universal message. You, deprived of homeland, found your place among other people fighting for right to self-determination. This is one of strangest chapters in Polish history, tragic and beautiful simultaneously. Your story, Legionnaire from Livorno, is testament of Polish soldiers who gave lives for foreign cause and in return received immortality in liberated nations' memory. In Haiti's cemeteries, you can still find old tombstones with Polish surnames, silent proof of our countrymen's presence in that land. When today someone looks at world maps seeking Haiti, that small Caribbean island, they might remember that there, in Cazale Mountains, live people who carry Polish genes and remember Polish roots. This is living monument to your story, soldier who sailed from Livorno in May 1802 and found new home on Caribbean soil. Haitian Revolution triumphed, and part of Poles remained there forever, leaving their mark in history far from Vistula, under palms and among sugarcane plantations.